We have a list of Obamagate unmaskers. A big lockdown protest expected in Michigan. 36.5 million without jobs. 3 million more in just the last week. Update on the Flynn case and Judge Sullivan shenanigans. Parkland Coward gets his job back. And Never Trump is officially never Republican. Coming up. Welcome, everybody, to the Buck Sexton Show. We had some interesting news breaking late in the evening last night. I'm excited to break it all down for you today. You know, you have the two main stories that are going on in the country right now. You have still the overwhelming majority of our attention, most hours spent on the TV, radio, etc. It's all focused on COVID-19. And we've entered now the phase where it's a fight against the wrong response to the disease, as much as it is now a fight against the disease. So there's that. And then you also have these big bombshells that have fallen as a result, largely of the acting director of national intelligence, Richard Grinnell, who is going in there and he's like the Wyatt Earp of the intelligence community right now. He's just saying, you know what, we're going to just declassify that thing that Adam Schiff really doesn't want people to know about. We're going to expose what a bunch of liars, the Democrats, and all their little stooges in the media running off to CNN and MSNBC to get contracts and push books full of lies where they promote themselves as heroes of the Republic. James Comey, among others. We're gonna dive into that for a little bit first today. I've got some stuff for you on the COVID-19 response. And by that, I mean the fight for freedom. We are now in a fight for our freedom against a mentality and against a government overreach that is threatening to not just destroy our economy, but to destroy our way of life. And I know that sounds extreme, but think about where we are now. We're 2 months into this, and they keep lying to us and changing the story. And ultimately, it's you no longer have any freedom because you're a threat. Your breathing is a threat to other human beings. You must do what we say, everything that we say. We'll return to that. Let me start, though, with, this list of those who are doing the unmasking. Those of you who have been listening to me for a while know one of the advantages that I've had, and it was a huge advantage early on in my career in media, is that I spent 5 years as a CIA officer. And so I had some idea about national security. I knew a lot about Iraq and Afghanistan from working those issues. I wasn't just a CIA guy who learned about that stuff on the side. Those were the issues. I was on the Iraq desk and then was sent to was essentially loaned to the Afghanistan desk. So I worked those issues, mostly counterterrorism and counterinsurgency. But I also got quite a dose of the federal bureaucracy. And so I understand what the nature of a bureaucracy is. This is where I get phrases like the giant self-licking ice cream cone, which we know is true of the bureaucracy. I also know what will motivate the bureaucrats to move fast, what their ultimate aims are, that process is the product, that mediocrity is the expectation, excellence is suspect. These are all things you learn when you're in the federal bureaucracy because it's government. And ultimately, if you're not making decisions in government, you're usually just shuffling paper around. If it's not very clear what your job is every day, there's some components of government where it's a really straightforward ask, right? What's the purpose of a cop? And why do you have a sheriff in your county? Oh, someone to enforce the law, someone with a gun to make sure the laws are enforced and to protect people and to hold criminals accountable to arrest them. Okay. Right, firemen, et cetera, et cetera. You go through that. What is the purpose of somebody who's, an assistant representative, or rather an assistant, deputy secretary to the trade representative for the blah, blah, blah? What do you really do all day? I don't know. You kind of just send emails, go to meetings. Anybody really care that you're there or not? Nah. No, I was always, I found it remarkable that when I was in the CIA, there was always the meeting and the onlookers. And this is a concept that I'm sure many of you are familiar with just from corporate America as well. But in the government, it's particularly clear. And you would know, we go into these pretty large conference rooms sometimes, and you'd have a meeting with, dozens and dozens of people in it. And there would be all these folks. There'd be the people that are at the focal point of the table. And then there'll be the people who know, no one has to tell them that they should be sitting at the actual table where the discussion, the long conference room table where the discussion's happening. And then you'll have near them the people who are the important seconds, if you will, the aides, the assistants, whatever. And then you have like rows of chairs and stuff for people that were supposed to be at the meeting, but didn't really do anything. And if they weren't there, no one cares. And they'll ask, does anybody have anything to add? And if you're in that outer row, the answer is no. Let me tell you right now, nobody who's sitting at that head of the government, the federal bureaucrats table, they don't care what you, the little, GS9 sitting in the back row who are taking notes on something. They don't care what you think. So I understand how government functions in a way that you only can when you've spent time working in it and been there. And that's why I also know that there's a panic right now, because a lot of what you're seeing, and this is true for some elected officials, but it's also true for many, many very powerful, very senior bureaucrats, particularly in the intelligence agencies and in the FBI and the upper echelons of federal law enforcement. Their dirty laundry is being exposed. I mean, we're seeing stuff that they didn't think we would get to see. And this is where we have the unmasker situation. Now, I think we've discussed unmasking on the show before. It's pretty straightforward. You're not supposed to collect on U.S. persons when you are doing surveillance using intelligence methods. So, in order to protect people from this really unconstitutional, but they would say incidental. Incidental is not the same thing as accidental. Remember that. They're trying to target. They're trying to catch your conversation. They just are doing it because they want to hear what the foreign person is saying. That's what they will tell you. But this is effectively a warrantless surveillance. This is intelligence surveillance as opposed to law enforcement. There's no, there's really no court protections. We've talked about FISA, for example. And so in unmasking, in masking, they decide that the American persons, their names are blocked out. And so you'll be reading a report and it'll say, American person 1 or, U.S. person 1 or whatever. They'll give it some designation. Talk to Osama bin Laden, and this is what was said. Now, that's obviously a very clear conversation that you would want to collect. But this also is the result of a lot of much lower level conversations nobody really cares about. So unmasking is when you're reading this report and you say, okay, I need to know, and you have to go to the originator, so whoever collected it, whichever agency, you go to the originator and you say, I need to know who this person is, and you have to give some explanation of it, and then you can find out who that person is. Now, is it something that happens? Yeah, it absolutely happens, but it's usually something that you would expect to occur from people who are involved in intelligence gathering and analysis, not, say, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations a few weeks before she's about to lose her job. You wouldn't think that would be somebody that would be doing this. And now we get to the General Flynn component of all of this. And look, I know there's a lot of layers here. And I know that people, after a while, you sort of get tired of some of this stuff. You get tired of hearing about these cases and about how all this went. But we're getting the truth now. So this is why it's important. This is the last couple of laps of a very long race, a race that ultimately, I can't say that there'll be justice, but at least there'll be clarity. There will be truth at the end of this. I don't think that there will be justice, though, because I don't believe that the wrongdoers will be punished. Your only hope for that is the Durham investigation, and I would not put a lot of stock. I would not put a lot of faith behind that. Not because I think Durham is a dishonest guy. I don't think that's the case. I just believe that they'll always be able to hide. And this is really what we've seen. This is the way the abuse by these Obamagate conspirators, and it was a conspiracy, the way that they were able to they will get away with it is just to say they believed in good faith things that turned out not to be true, and that the incorrect belief at the time was politically useful to them. That's just incidental. I just happen to believe this very fraudulent report about Russia collusion because I'm that foolish and that naive, can't get mad at me for that. And then I took action based on my own stupid belief that this is what happened and that it was going after a political enemy. That's a coincidence. That's really their justification. So the Senate, it was not D&I Grinnell. D&I Grinnell was involved in the process of giving the DOJ information that it wanted here because of the unmasking stuff around Flynn. Because really what we know now, what's been proven is that there was a conspiracy to frame. I mean, they framed General Flynn. That's what they did. It was a frame job. And so we want to know, and the DOJ and Attorney General Barr want to know more about how this happened and what the different components were that were involved. So the Senate, Senator Rand Paul was making a lot of noise about this yesterday, released the list, the unmasking list. It was properly declassified. And here's what you have on it. Below is a list of recipients who may have received Lieutenant General Flynn's identity in response to a request processed between 8th of November 2016 and the 31st of January 2017 to unmask an identity that had been generically referred to in an NSA foreign intelligence report. Each individual was an authorized recipient of the original report, and the unmasking was approved through the NSA standard process, which includes a review of the justification for the request. Only certain personnel are authorized to submit unmasking requests in the NSA system. The principals are identified. We cannot confirm they saw the unmasked information. Now, this would usually be some pretty boring stuff. There's a lot of, if you're working on a specific country account or issue account, if you're working on a non-proliferation office, let's say, in the intelligence community, or a terrorism office in the intelligence community, and, there's a U.S. person who's captured in a surveillance report of someone you think is a known terrorist financier, you might want to unmask that guy. You might want to know what's going on here. And that could also possibly be something that, you would, well, now you get into does law enforcement get to use this information? It's not a duly predicated law enforcement search, but does sometimes this information manage to find its way? Sometimes it finds its way to a Washington Post reporter. That's what we found out when it involves General Flynn. So, yes, of course, these rules and regulations are not perfect, and they are not always respected. But who asked for, remember, this is specific to General Flynn's identity. Who asked about this right around the time? I mean, it was the conversation between Flynn and Kislyak was on the 28th of December, 2016, my birthday. Oh, Buck, it's your birthday. Yeah, it was my birthday. And General Flynn, as we know, was framed up by the FBI. And a big part of that was the leak of classified phone intercept information to the Washington Post. And all these Obama people, they're all upset. They're all sore losers. You got to remember this. They all thought that the Hillary administration and all their friends were going to be running D.C. and they were going to be in power, even if Obama had to leave, Hillary was going to come in, and all this stuff. It was going to be great, right? It was going to be fine, fantastic. Oh no, Trump comes in, and he beat her, and they couldn't handle it. So that's why in the unmasking request list you have here, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Samantha Power. The 30th of November, 2016, the 2nd of December, the 7th of December, the 14th of December, the 23rd of December, and the 11th of January. Unmasking Flynn. Now, even if this was all completely legitimate, are we supposed to believe that these people didn't realize? They keep reading classified intercepts of conversations involving the incoming National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn. They didn't think that this was a little bit, that this is just put aside the legality. Is this ethical? You're reading about your political opponents using the U.S. intelligence process to do it. This is a backdoor on constitutional protection. That's what this is. Just like FISA. And remember what we saw with FISA? Oh, it's sacred. Nobody would abuse FISA. Oh, yeah? FISA's a joke. Nobody was paying attention. You could put you basically read something. If you're an FBI agent, you could read something in a news article and say, yeah, I saw this thing. Or have some confidential informant write up some report on a Word doc and just, pass that along. Yeah, it's what my confidential informant told me. The FISA they got open on Carter Page was appallingly flimsy and false. But remember what they were telling us? Oh, nobody would ever abuse FISA. FISA works like a Swiss watch. And now we look at unmasking. Oh, unmasking happens all the time. Nothing to see here. No big deal. If there's nothing to see here, why are they so upset at the release of these names? Why, for example, is, are the Democrats and people like Shifty Schiff so angry? Oh, I have some theories about that, but it's pretty clear, isn't it? As I go through these names, you'll see Obamagate is real, folks. The Obama administration, in its departing weeks, okay, think about that. They're leaving power. They tried to sabotage the incoming administration, and they used the law enforcement agencies, the press, and the deep state actors to do so. Oh, who are the names? I'm sorry. I got so excited to tell you about all the lies and how upset the libs are here about the unmasking. Who are the names on the list of the people requesting what just happened to be the identity of Lieutenant General Flynn? Who? Oh, Samantha Powers. I told you that one. James Clapper, 2nd of December, 28th of December, 7th of January. John Brennan, director of the CIA, 14th of December, 15th of December. You go down this list, it's pretty scary, folks. You also have, who else is on here? You have James Comey, director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And this is and there's a whole bunch of other, I'm trying to remember, make sure I get all them in here. You have the McDonough, the White House chief of staff, Obama's chief of staff. He wanted to know. Wasn't that interesting? And then you have finally, and this is probably the best one. Yeah, Dennis McDonough, yeah. And then you finally have Joseph R. Biden on the 12th of January, 2017. Biden can barely remember what planet he's on. But we are to believe that Joe Biden had an urgent need to know to expose the identity of a U.S. person that just happened to be Lieutenant General Flynn about, 10 days before Trump's inauguration? It was that important to know what General Flynn was talking about? Or was this just about curiosity and the ability to exploit something that we had hoped wouldn't happen? We were acting on the premise that there was a certain level of government in which people would conduct themselves in good faith when it came to things like unmasking. That was proven wrong. The authoritarian, power-mad, socialist libs used this to spy on political opponents on their way out the door.
These rumors have been going around for years that the President Obama's administration was abusing this power of unmasking, and this sounds like they were abusing it to go after a political opponent, which I think is a very serious offense and should be investigated. And the fact that Vice President Biden is directly involved with unmasking a political opponent. Think about it. You remember we went through this thing called impeachment? They said the President Trump was using the government to go after a political opponent. This is Vice President Biden using the spying powers of the United States to go after a political opponent. He's caught red-handed here. Vice President Biden's caught red-handed eavesdropping on a political opponent's phone calls. That, to me, is alarming.
Let's also remember that General Flynn, in a sense, is part of was part of the Trump campaign, right? So this was occurring. I mean, and this was only the window they looked at. I would want to know, how about the window of the 3 months before it? Who else from the Trump campaign? If it's so routine, if it's so normal that there's all these unmasking requests that just happen to be of the incoming national security advisor, folks. This isn't just, some random person who's talking to some strange people overseas. No. If this is so normal, how many of these conversations were intercepted in the months before involving Flynn? This is what I really want to know. Were there conversations intercepted with Donald Trump himself? Was the presidential candidate for the opposition party? I don't know, but they're telling us this is no big deal. This just happens, man. Totally just happens. Was Trump intercepted? Was Pence intercepted? We know that the vice president and the president's chief of staff, which means the president himself, saw it, by the way. That means Obama. We know that they were looking at conversations that Flynn's having, intercepts of conversations. And they're now telling us, oh, this happens all the time, totally normal, nothing to see here. We're supposed to believe this is normal? Okay, well, let's extend that theory out a little bit. How many Trump campaign officials during the campaign were caught in unmasking by U.S. surveillance? And do we really even have a Fourth Amendment? Do we really even have any reasonable expectation of privacy? You know, do we think that there has to be a warrant or not for these kinds of government intrusions? It seems like we keep coming across answers that say, no, if the government wants to hear your stuff, they can. And they'll make some justification up for it. Just like right now, as we're seeing with the COVID-19 pandemic, the government now has just claimed for itself total control over you. And if you disagree, you're putting people's lives at risk. If you want to live a normal human life right now, there are government officials all across the country, including in the federal public health apparatus, who will tell you you're putting other people at risk, and therefore you're not allowed to have those freedoms. What's it going to be like during flu season? You're going to tell me to stay home then, too? You're going to tell me I have to wear a mask then, too? You're going to tell me that I have no basic autonomy and lock me house arrest for what? Look, the government has taken all this power into its hands. The government's also playing with fire here. And if this thing gets out of control, it gets out of control fast and it gets ugly. So they need to back off. This stuff is nuts that's going on in some of these blue states. But really, maybe in a way, you know, I see it gets me fired up, and I don't want to lose the train of thought right now on the unmasking. But I do want you to have that thought exercise with me. If this is so normal, if this is so legitimate, who else were they unmasking in the Trump campaign? How many Trump if they're going to tell me that we would never read Trump's conversations, never read a Trump transcript, why? They've told us that this is fine, that this happens, that there's no problem with it. It's incidental. They didn't know who it was. Oh, really? You don't know who's caught a senior U.S. official, blacked out name, speaking to the Russian ambassador. Hey, we're going to be in charge soon. So when we're in charge, just know that we'll have a good relationship and just wait a couple weeks, buddy. Yeah, they have no idea who that is. This was an argument I was seeing yesterday. You morons making this argument out there don't know a damn thing. The text is already in the report. I used to read these reports all day long. It's my job. I was a little cubicle nerd in the intel community reading these reports all day. We know who it is. But if you're going to make the claim and if you're going to leak it and if you're going to use law enforcement, you better be darn sure, right? You better be very sure that you know exactly who it is. You can't go to the FBI and say, oh, I think there's a violation of the Logan Act here, unless you're sure that, you know the name is. I mean, theoretically, you think it's General Flynn, but maybe it's some other incoming, maybe it's General Flynn's, number two, or, maybe it's Michael Anton coming in to be a National Security Council spokesperson, or, somebody, who knows, right? KT McFarland, the Deputy National Security Advisor, right? So you got to be sure, but you kind of know. And that's the whole point. Shifty Schiff doesn't like any of this. Oh, no. Another place where their logic all falls apart. Shifty Schiff is upset. Why? If this is so normal, if this is so routine, why does the exposure of this information look so bad? Also, the fact that Biden, 2 weeks before he's leaving office, just happens to want to know about a General Flynn conversation. Also, I would like to know, we should do a similar search, they would have it, a similar search of when Obama took over. Who wants to guess if there was a series of unmasking requests like this involving Obama or one of his, top 3 national security personnel, vice president, national security advisor, incoming, you name it, White House chief of staff. Who wants to bet that there wasn't this series of totally normal unmasking requests? These people are liars. They're liars. They're clowns, although it's very unfunny. It's actually really disturbing what they did. And the president knows this. He understands this. This is what he has to say about it. Play clip 24.
Well, the unmasking is a massive thing. It's, I just got a list. It's, who can believe a thing like this? And I watched Biden yesterday on Good Morning America being interviewed by one of your colleagues, George Stephanopoulos, and he said he knew nothing about anything. He has no idea. He knows nothing about anything. Nothing at all. And then it gets released today that he was a big unmasker. So how do you know nothing if you're one of the unmaskers? It's one of the very big stories, and I suspect you'll have, if it's possible, even bigger stories coming out.
I think that may be true. I hope that's true. We do deserve answers here. Let's also recall that in the last week or so, we've seen the behind closed door transcripts from the House investigation of Russia collusion, which showed us that Clapper and Brennan and all these, oh my gosh, liars, going on TV. There's definitely collusion. They were lying about it. Schiff was lying about it because he knew. He had heard the witnesses say, I don't know anything about, I didn't see any actual evidence. I mean, come on, we're under oath now. Schiff is a disgrace, but he's a hatchet man for his party, so they don't care. They just view Schiff as a weapon of disrepute. They view Schiff as a guy who cannot be trusted, and that's great because he'll just do their dirty work for them. They can trust him, but the country can't trust him, right? But he is oleaginous. Great word for him. Play 21.
Well, what's going on is this is the president's effort to distract from the fact that under his watch, we've now lost 80,000 American lives, and our economy is in the worst shape it's been since the Great Depression. This is what this is about. They want to distract attention. They want to create some kind of a counter narrative that, no, it was actually Obama committing crimes, not Donald Trump. It was all the Obama administration of figures. It was Adam Schiff. Don't pay attention to Americans dying right now. Don't pay attention to Americans unemployed right now. But instead, let's focus on this counter narrative that it was Hillary that must have colluded. It was Obama that must have been, committing unethical acts instead of Donald Trump. But the American people see through this. They are focused right now on making sure that they can stay.
I can't take it anymore. Sorry. Just notice how Schiff is saying, Trump is trying to distract you. No, we're learning very important stuff about an investigation that consumed the country for years. And Schiff tries to distract everybody by saying, well, look at what's going on in the rest of the country. Yeah, we know, you jerk, what's going on in the rest of the country. You don't have to tell us about that. What's his answer here? He's a disgusting liar. He always has been, always will be. The Democratic Party claims that Trump lied. Yeah, Trump has some issues with facts and figures sometimes. He exaggerates. He BS's. I know. I'm not delusional. But he doesn't stare the country in the face and just intentionally mislead and lie about stuff that matters. Pelosi does that. Schiff does that. Schumer does that. They don't care. So what to make of Obamagate? We are joined by my friend David Reboy. He is a Republican strategist and national security analyst. He's down in Florida. Mr. Reboy, good to have you, sir.
Great to be here.
What do you think about this list yesterday and all the explanations we're hearing for why, say, Joe Biden wanted to know about a Flynn phone call 2 weeks before he had to figure out where he was going to be resting his head because it wasn't going to be as vice president anymore?
Well, in Joe Biden's case, it's more plausible than for the others that he had no idea what he was doing or why he was asking for the name to be unmasked. But let's be real. the first thought that came to my mind when I saw this kind of weird, massive collection of folks who are doing the unmasking, most of whom have no real legitimate reason to be asking for this kind of intelligence in the first place, is maybe they all sat down. It's possible that they all sat down and they said, okay, if we all unmask, then if we ever get caught, the weight of this will fall on all of us and not just some of us. That's what I was thinking immediately, as to why so many people were really doing this. And we know too that there was an Obama directive that allowed the easier transit of this kind of information from one government agency to another. What's also getting lost in this debate is the fact that, what makes this really criminal is the leak, the original leak to I think it was to Ignatius at the Post about Flynn's call,
right,
which was completely illegal, and we still haven't had any kind of legal accountability, law enforcement accountability on that. As far as I know, there's never been an investigation. We'll see about what Durham is digging up, but this whole thing has taken so much time that I'm just afraid that we know the media is going to try to pass this off as old news.
Oh, absolutely, and I have to
happens.
say I think last night at least MSNBC and CNN, I don't believe either of them were really covering the unmasking. Now I'd have to update that, but as of last night, there was basically no coverage of it, and now we're seeing that the pandemic is going to be the go-to for when they don't want to talk about something that's not the pandemic, which is a whole conversation we can get into with you a little bit. All they have to do is just say, how could you focus on anything else right now? How could anything else be of any importance? That's what Adam Schiff was doing before, which is troubling. I also want to ask you, since we got you, you're down in Florida and you're of sound mind about these things. Somehow your governor has been the target of, and your state, but particularly because it's a Republican governor and it's a swing state that we all know is really important. Oh, Florida's heading for disaster. Florida actually hasn't hit disaster at all. It's done pretty well, given what the numbers, the population size, and others would suggest. Meanwhile, Governor Cuomo is a hero, and New York is a disaster. How do you see that as a Floridian?
Look, I really like DeSantis. I think he's been great throughout all of this. I live in an area we've got 3 counties on the southeastern part of the state, which is Miami-Dade and Broward and Palm Beach. And these 3 counties comprise most of the Democratic part of the state. And as you would imagine, for that reason, they've been eager to close down, lock down, and slow to want to open back up. And we see already West Palm is starting to, West Palm is open, I believe, already. They've already got restaurants open, they're social distancing. But Broward and Dade are not. So
within the state, this is interesting. People know that. So within the state, the blue areas are more on lockdown than the red areas are. At least that's what you're seeing right now.
That's right. That's correct. If I were to jump in the car and drive over to Naples on the West Coast right now, I could go to a restaurant and have dinner, but I can't. So I understand the situation that DeSantis is in with these kind of local blue areas that are determined to shut down. Local blue, very high population areas that are determined to I guess be the last ones to open back up. But I think they will. I think this area, especially Broward and Miami-Dade now, are gonna be open shortly after West Palm, and then all of Florida will be open. DeSantis has been reamed out in the press. I mean, the first thing I think was with the big Florida offensive against him was against opening some of the beaches in Jacksonville. And they predicted, the media went into absolute meltdown hysteria mode. And I guess it was nothing compared to what they did when Georgia opened up, which is, they said,
there's going to be like mass murder. I mean, Georgia's been open for 3 weeks now, and they've been predicting mass murder every day, and Georgia's fine. I mean, it's not perfect,
Right.
but it's doing fine.
Atlanta and the mayor of Atlanta took to the Atlantic, I think, or some other outlet to say, how irresponsible and terrible it is, and yet they seem to be doing fine. I've always been of the opinion that we as a country, as a human race, are going to have to just walk through the fire here when it comes to this virus, because there's no vaccine around the corner, and at some point you're going to have to open up. I think it's. I mean,
and there's going to be risk.
It's well past time that we do so.
Yeah, and it's not going to be perfect, but it's time. It's time we do so. Well, I'm glad at least Florida, there's some pockets of sanity down there. Dave Reboy, everybody, political strategist. Check him out on Twitter. Follow him there. David, thanks so much for making the time for us, man. Get some sun.
Thanks, buddy. Take care.
Take care.